Let's start with a number of aspects of Purim and the Megillah of Esther, which at the outset will seem to be completely unrelated to one another. Each one will be a question unto itself. And then I'll give you one central idea and show you how that idea ties them all together. First of all, as everyone knows, God's name does not appear in the entire book. Contrary to popular belief, it's not the only book in the Bible for which that's true. There's one other, namely Song of Songs. But it is quite remarkable. If there are only two out of all the books in which God's name doesn't appear, that needs some kind of explanation. Secondly, there are 5 of the books of the Bible which are called Megillah. Esther, Koheles, Eicha, Shirim, and Rus. They're all called Megillah. But when you speak of Ha-Megillah without any qualifying name, it's Megillah Esther. Why would the title, The Megillah, apply particularly to the book of Esther and not to any of the other 4? Then there are a couple of customs on Purim. One is dressing up in masks. Why would wearing masks be an important expression of the idea of Purim? Then, as I'm sure I don't have to tell you by this time, there is a mitzvah of getting drunk. And no, this is not Judaism's concession to reality that at least once a year you have to get plowed. That's not the genuine understanding. Considering the Jewish emphasis on considered, thoughtful, deliberate choice of behavior, the idea of getting drunk in any form is something that requires a special explanation. Then there's a custom of eating Kreplach. That's a piece of dough with a piece of meat inside. Something as prosaic as eating Kreplach, as you'll see, fits right in with the theme of the day. Then there's the name of the holiday. The book of Esther is written in Hebrew. One prominent word in the book is Pur. Pur is a Persian word. The author of the book knows that. So the 2 times that the book uses the word Pur, it's immediately translated into Hebrew. That's the Goral. The author knows the reader doesn't understand Persian. You want to know what it means. So he says, they use the Pur, that is to say the Goral, the lots. Of course, you're writing a book for Hebrew readers, and they don't know Persian. Why put in the Persian word and then immediately translate it to Hebrew word? Because you know that the reader doesn't know what the Persian word means. Why do that? And then you name the holiday after the Persian word. What's going on? Right? And finally, there is a saying, goes back to the Arizal, a very striking saying. The 10th of Tishrei, the Day of Atonement. Day of Atonement. What is its title in Hebrew?
Yom Kippur.
Oh, he said it right. He said it right. Nowhere in the entire Tanakh is it called Yom Kippur. Ever. It's called Yom Kippurim. In the plural. Why is it in the plural? I was shocked to find, I couldn't find a single commentator who even asked this question. I found in the Shulchan Aruch a quotation, I think from the Maharil, in Hilchos Yom Kippur, where he says that's atonement for the present and for the ancestors, but it ought to be somehow a prominent thing. It's the title of the word and not in the colloquial use. We all call it Yom Kippur, but it's Yom Kippurim. Now, the Arizal said, those letters in Hebrew, you know, in a Torah scroll, there are no vowels. Those letters could be read slightly differently. Add another dot under the kaf, vertically, and you get Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. Well, Thanks a lot. That doesn't explain. That just piles mystery on mystery. Could you think of two greater polar opposites than Yom Kippur and Purim? Yom Kippur, you're fasting and you're in the synagogue and you're praying for your life and you're trying to reform yourself with all your mistakes and the mood is somber. And Purim, how could it be a day like Purim? And then, that everybody knows, but I, as a logician, want to stress, when you say A is like B, that is not the same as saying B is like A. A is like B is asymmetrical. If you want to say the two of them are similar without indicating priority, what you say is A and B are similar. That you can say. But if you say A is like B, what you mean is B has some quality and has it in a paradigm sense, and A approximates B in that quality. So, when the Arizal said that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, what we have to try to understand is that there's some quality that they share in some sense, Yom Kippur and Purim, but really, if you analyze the quality in depth, with care, you'll see that Purim has it in a paradigm sense, and Yom Kippur only approximates it. That's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for an answer to each of these questions. Now, I want to start with a deep and broad concept, and I'll give you some applications of it, and then we'll come back to answering these questions. Purim, along with many other events in Jewish history, is called a nes, a miracle. The word nes in Hebrew itself needs some thought. Nes has three applications. One is to miracle, one is flagpole, and the other is test. That's so just the test. What could possibly be in common between a flagpole and a test and a miracle? Okay, let's leave miracle on the side. That's the controversial item. But a flagpole and a test reminds me of the Miller analogies. You know, when you take your...
A test? Like...
Any kind of test. You can bang a pot to show how strong it is. You can put litmus paper into a liquid to show it's an acid or a base. Any kind of test. It could be a test in the university as well. The common element is this. The function of a test, primarily, is to reveal something about the tested item which isn't on the surface. You have a potter. He's selling his pots. The potential buyer says, "How do I know your pots are strong?" He says, "Watch." Picks it up, takes a hammer, bang! Doesn't go to pieces. So the buyer says, "I'll take that one." I don't want to ship it to 50 unless you're willing to bang 50 times. So banging on this one, I'll take that one. It's tested now. I know how strong it is. Looking at it, I can't tell how strong it is. You bang it with a hammer. Now I know how strong it is. Litmus paper. You look at this liquid. Is it an acid or a base? Often it's not pleasant to have to taste it. You could tell by tasting, but it's not a pleasant experience. You put the little piece of paper in, you look at the color and say, "Oh, it's an acid or a base." That's how you know. When you take a test in university, you get an A. I had one student who thought because I gave him an A on his term paper that he could get it published. I had to break it to him gently that he was not opening new ground in the field. The paper was supposed to show me what's going on in here. Did he understand what I taught? Did he have some original ideas? Which, of course, were wrong in the end, but he didn't know that. But he has some original ideas. Could he write in a coherent fashion? I gave him an A. That shows me what he's understood. That's the function of a test, to reveal what's not obvious on the surface. What does a flag do? A flag often reveals the character of what it's attached to. In ancient times, when you had wars were fought on the ground by massive armies. In the thick of battle, with the dust raging all around, if you want to retreat to a safe haven, you'd better get back to your side. Because if you run to the enemy side, you're going to be dead. Which side is my side? Oh yeah, there's it. The flag. Now I know where my side is. Right? The function of the flag is to identify the thing that it's attached to. A flag, just like a test, identifies the thing it's attached to. Now, if I take this concept and apply it to a miracle, I get the following result. One of the key functions of a miracle is to teach me about the non-miracle. Not just to display something in itself which teaches a lesson, but to reveal something about the non-miracle. Think of it as a flag attached to something else. In particular, a miracle shows God's agency. What's happening the rest of the time when you don't see God's agency? Is it that God is going on vacation? Or is it also God's agency just under wraps? How am I supposed to look at the rest of the world, which is non-miraculous? Now, the truth is, I'm using one version of the word miracle. There's another version. Maybe if we have time, but then I'll disentangle that. But at any rate, for the time being, the word miracle in our vocabulary is going to mean an event that shows God's agency. And one of the key elements, the significance of a miracle, is that it's supposed to teach me something about the non-miraculous. I want to show you how this has been a theme in Jewish history, interaction with God from the beginning, and how it carries out at least most of the time. We'll get to Purim. There's another edition that goes on to Hanukkah. I spoke about that Hanukkah time. I'm not going to go that far this evening. Let's think about the plagues in Egypt. There were 10 plagues. But I think they subdivided into two groups, two different categories, which have a very different message. 4 of the 10 plagues contradicted nature. They simply overwhelmed the world with utterly unnatural events. Events that had no echo in nature, no natural process, which bring them about. Blood. The Nile turned to blood. Water doesn't turn to blood. Hail. Each hailstone had a spark of fire in it. Hail doesn't contain fire. Darkness. 3 days of palpable darkness. Physically present darkness. And death of the firstborn. There's no known disease to man that strikes only firstborn. Those 4 plagues break nature, override nature. They exhibit a power that simply overwhelms nature, puts it on hold, and replaces it with something else that's utterly unnatural. The other 6 are quite different. The other 6 take a natural process and enhance it, multiply it, focus it, but they use the natural process to achieve the result. For example, frogs. Egypt was inundated with frogs. Where did the frogs come from? The Torah is quite explicit about this. They came from the river. That's where frogs always come from. That's where they breed, in the river. But now, when Moses announced it, the river went into hyperdrive, overdrive. 1,000 times as much, 10,000 times as much. It's spewing out of the river. And when Moses said it would be over, bang, it was over. But they didn't fall from the heavens, and they didn't grow out of the flower pots. It wasn't a spectacularly anti-natural plague. On the contrary, natural processes were used in a supernatural fashion.
There's one giant frog.
That's a medrash. I'm dealing with the explicit text. And when Rabbi Akiva said that, they said to him, Akiva klach etzel goyim v'ohlos. They sent it back to halacha. At any rate, they bred in the Nile, and they spewed out of the Nile. It was a natural process, supernaturally enhanced. If I would put it in grammar, the supernatural here is the adverb, not the verb. Boils. People get boils. It's a terrible thing. And usually some small percentage of the population has boils. Now suddenly everybody had boils. Lice. Lice are lice. Lice are a common phenomenon. At any point in time, 10% or 20% of the population could have lice. 100% have lice. Cattle sickness. Some cattle die all the time from various sicknesses. It's a wipeout. Wild animals. There were wild animals in the hills. Usually they were afraid of human beings. Now they lost their fear of human beings and terrorized the human beings in their habitations. It wasn't griffins and mythological creatures. It was lions and tigers, which were present in this area of the world at that time. Locusts. How did the locusts enter Egypt? How did they enter and spread in Egypt? The Torah says explicitly they were blown in on the wind. That's how locusts travel. Yes, they have wings, but on their own steam they can't travel very far. But they ride the wind from one place to the next. And the Torah is quite explicit. That's how it happened. They came in the way they always come in. Just that they came in exactly when Moses said the infestation was more concentrated than ever had been done before or since. And when he said bust, it was over in one day. So it's a supernatural programming, manipulating of natural processes. Now, one of the reasons that these plagues were caused is to bring a message to the Egyptians. It says so explicitly. The Egyptians should know that God is running the world. The Malbim points out there were a lot of Jews who thought like Egyptians also. So it wasn't just for the Egyptians. There were Jews there too who had lost their sight of how the world runs. Let's try to absorb the impact of those miracles from the point of view of a contemporary polytheist. The Nile turns to blood. What does an Egyptian believer in the Egyptian pantheon say? Well, it's the Jewish God against the Nile. The Nile is a very powerful God. And if the Jewish God could cause them to bleed, that's impressive. That's impressive. Of course, now, I have to put in a footnote here, something that's very, very little known. The plague consisted of turning the Nile to blood for one moment. The water in the Nile turned to blood in that moment, period. And it stayed blood, and then the river flows. And as the river flows, the blood is washed downstream and is replaced by water. It wasn't a continuous turning of water into blood. And that's why the Torah says 3 times that the Egyptians couldn't drink water from the river because of the stinking fish. It said 3 times they couldn't drink water from the river. If it was all blood, there wasn't any water to drink. But no, it was turned into blood, and then for that moment, all the water in the river turned to blood, and then the river flows and is replaced by water. At any rate, when that happens, the Egyptian says, I'll bet that the Jewish God snuck up when he wasn't looking. He just knifed him in the back. That's the way they do things. Notice that after that one shot, the Nile never turns to blood again. Now the Nile's on his guard. You see, Jewish God, he has to catch him when he's not sleeping, so then it's going to be more difficult. Right? You see, he held him off. That's the way they thought. Each plague lasted a week, and then after that, a 3 weeks respite, and another plague. What you see is a conflict and an overwhelming. Fiery hail. What is that? What could it be? It's something completely different. So what do you see? You see a God, that's the way they thought, who has the power to intervene from time to time and do his own thing. Fiery hail doesn't come ever from anywhere else. Came on this occasion, he does his own thing. And the forces of nature, which are under the control of other gods, temporarily he can overwhelm them and insert his own effects. Palpable darkness, death of the firstborn. He's powerful enough to insert his own effects in the world, contrary to the forces of nature, which were just other gods. That's those 4 in the first category. But the last 6 pose a much more difficult challenge. Because in ancient polytheistic religions, each function gets one god. There's one god of the sun, and one god of the moon, and one god of war, and one god of the sea, one god of the wind. There aren't 2. Now, for 1 week, for sure, it was the Jewish God managing frog production from the Nile. Because Moses predicted it, and Moses predicted when it would end. Okay, so who's managing it the rest of the time? When it's going normally? 2 gods? The Jewish God sometimes, and other gods other times? That doesn't fit well into natural mental sense. If this is definitely an expression of the Jewish God, there's at least an indication that the rest of the time is the Jewish God also. And so it goes for each thing. Boils. Bodily health and sickness. The sickness for the animals. Lice. Who controls the production of lice? Those animals that stay in the hills. They're usually afraid of human beings. Now for a week they're fearless and terrorizing the human population. And that's definitely the Jewish God. Moses predicted it.
Did they terrorize the Jewish population?
No. But it's interesting. It says that Pharaoh sent to check about the cattle sickness, and he didn't send to check about this. Why? Because nobody wanted to go out in the street with the lions and bears in the street. The cattle sickness they went to check. And this they didn't check because they didn't want to go out. So I was very precise about that. So in this 6, what you get for an open, objective mind, which cuts out almost everybody, for an open, objective mind, a natural bridge to saying, wait a minute, it isn't just that the Jewish God is one among many, quite powerful, can suspend the others when he likes and insert his own effects. What we think of as nature is also his doing. It's also his doing. Here the miracle begins to shed light on the non-miraculous, which, as I told you, is the key meaning of the word nes. Now, when you come to the Purim story, I think you have the same effect. Let's go through the Purim story and imagine ourselves experiencing it, reacting to it, trying to understand it, and see how it looks. Achashverosh throws a party, a 6-month bash. Even Hollywood could be envious of that. Right? They knew how to party. And then there's another week for the people in Shushan. He's an Oriental zhlub, and he does things that Orientals do. It's bigger on a bigger scale, so he's a bigger zhlub. Would you see this as open divine providence, as a miracle for some purpose or other? It wouldn't be a clue. Nobody would have a clue to that. Then at the end, he calls Vashti in to make an appearance, to show off her beauty. Okay, those of you who learned the Megillah with me know there's a whole political intrigue here. She's a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. He's an outsider who's taken the throne. He doesn't have his own legitimacy. He's leaning on her, but she's challenging him for his authority, so he wants to get rid of her. He invites her in a very degrading manner to come and show off her beauty. And as the verse says, in her crown, how else would she come? She's going to come without the crown? In her crown is what you call a mute. In her crown and nothing else. He wants her to appear naked to show off her beauty. She says, drop dead. Yeah, I've got to come to you naked in front of all these people to show off my beauty? Drop dead. So now he's got a challenge. And so Mamuchan gives him a whole feminist spin on the event, and he manages to get rid of her. You're witnessing this as a Jew. Is that a miracle in this? That's what these Orientals do. They're a little crazy. They're lowlifes. They're full of degraded behavior. And that's what he did. He was drunk. It's just happening. That's all. Then there's a beauty contest for the new position of queen. Esther wins. Somebody had to win. When you say, but it's 1,000,000 to 1, that's what a lottery is. A lottery is a device for guaranteeing a very improbable event. Right? 1 in a million is going to win. It was, 1 in a million that he would win. But you knew that a 1 in a million chance had to win because only one could win to be queen. So she won to be queen. So what? Why would anybody think that was directly a miracle? Yeah.
Was she actually really beautiful? It didn't say she was green.
It says in the text that she was beautiful. Whatever else, I'm not dealing with the drushim now. I'm just dealing with the bold text. Now, she hides her background. That's a bit strange. How could she manage to hide her background? Nobody's talking about it. Achashverosh made efforts to get people to talk. They were unsuccessful. That's odd. Okay, but odd things happen. The fact that something's odd doesn't mean it's necessarily a miracle. Mordecai overhears the plot to assassinate the king. Tells the queen, tells Esther, and she tells it over. They're caught, they're punished. People are plotting to assassinate kings regularly. Almost always the plots are foiled, otherwise it would hardly pay to be king, because your career would be very short. And so, this is more or less the normal behavior of kingdoms and plotters and so on. So was Mordecai. Okay, they spoke a language that wasn't known. He happened to remember the Sanhedrin, so he knew a lot of languages. Right? All of this could be easily happenstance within the normal probabilities of events that take place, and no one would pay attention. Until Haman conceives a hatred for Mordecai and the Jewish people. He wants to have them all killed. Of course, they send out the decrees. And then he can't stand it that Mordecai won't bow down. Comes into the palace, planning to tell the king to kill Mordecai. That night, the king can't sleep. So he tells his servants to bring the history books, because as everyone knows, history puts you to sleep. Well, that wasn't the reason. The reason was because he couldn't sleep and he felt his conscience was bothering him and maybe he made a mistake. Okay, whatever it is. And the book is open precisely to that page. The page which records that years before, Mordecai saved the king's life. So they read this to him, and now suddenly the king says, hey, he saved my life. Did we do anything to reward him? Which also is passing strange. You would have expected if somebody saves your life that you would reward him to encourage other people to do that. Don't you want people saving your life? I mean, isn't that a good thing? So you would give a reward and publicize it, and he didn't do it in this case. Okay, the Jews were downtrodden and despised by everyone to reward a Jew, maybe. But now suddenly, his conscience is bothering him. Maybe I should have... Oh my goodness gracious, do something for him. And then he says, who's in the courtyard? And who's there? Haman is there. Come to tell the king to hang Mordecai. He says, you take him and honor him in public, ride him on the horse with the king's robes. Now, at that point, it's quite clear this isn't an accident. If you would write a novel, and have this scene in it with this background, give it to Simon & Schuster, at this point they would say, this is utterly unrealistic. It's utterly unrealistic. They have to change this. Now listen carefully. They're right. It is utterly unrealistic. That's the point of the story. The point of the story is that this doesn't happen by accident. This doesn't happen by accident. And then Esther, she's queen, situated to plead on behalf of the Jewish people. That doesn't happen by accident. All of a sudden, a person wakes up and says, hey, something's going on here. That far, I think, is pretty obvious. Now I want to make the slightly less than obvious move. Let's now use the understanding that you get at the end of the story and go back to the beginning and think over those events again. Okay, Mordecai was saved from this by what's written in the history book. What's written in the history book? That he saved the king's life. And that's how he was saved miraculously now that the history book was open precisely to that page on that night when the king couldn't sleep and Haman was coming in to kill him. So maybe Mordecai's overhearing the plot wasn't an accident. Because his overhearing the plot was the leverage by which his life was saved here. So maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe divine providence planted him to discover the plot and to save the king's life. And the king shouldn't reward him, so that years later, that could be the leverage to stop Haman. And now, Queen Esther, with her identity a secret, reveals her identity, and with that shock value is the instrument by which the Jewish people are saved. I don't mean to say they wouldn't have been saved otherwise, but this is how they were saved. Mordecai makes that point. So the thoughtful onlooker has to say, wow, she's there just when we need her. How did she get there? Well, there was the 6-month bash, and then there was the struggle between Ahasuerus and Vashti for political control, and she failed to come, and he threw her out, and then there was a beauty contest. That's how she got there. So maybe that wasn't an accident either. Maybe that also was planned. Because you see, that's how the Jewish people were saved in the end. What happens here is this. People, whole community, go through a series of events which they interpret as natural. And then they're forced to go back and reinterpret them as miraculous. Now, what lesson do you learn from that? If those events, which I lived through and I was sure they were just happenstances of politics and sociology and the rest, turned out to be God's agency, but hidden at that time, what about the rest of what's going on? The rest of what's going on, which seems to me to be nothing but happenstance, maybe I'm wrong about that also. Maybe I'm wrong about that also. That they really aren't happenstance. Just as I had to change my mind about these, but I'm forced to change my mind by the events at the end, so I could learn the lesson to change my mind about the general happenings in the world. This is again the word nace, where the miracle forces you to think more broadly about the non-miraculous events in the world, that they are also God's providence, but under wraps, hidden. It's not an accident that this miracle took place in exile, during a period of exile, of external control, where you can be swamped and overwhelmed by the greatness of the foreign empire, and its culture and its religion and its success. And here God is giving a visible demonstration that whatever goes on, even in that empire, So, the theme of Purim is revealing God's presence where it otherwise would be hidden. Revealing God's presence where it otherwise would be hidden. Now let's go back to the questions that we started with and see if we can't answer them. Why isn't God's name written in the book? It's obvious. To write God's name in the book is to wave the flag and say, here God is. No, the whole point of the book is to write a sequence of events which don't look as if God is doing them, and you're supposed to analyze it and reinterpret it on your own. You have to see God in a book where His name isn't written. The word Megillah can come from the root galal, which means to roll. It means a rolled up scroll. But it also can come from the root which means legalos, which means to reveal. Megillah means to reveal something. Ha-Megillah, the Megillah, without any further qualification, is the story of Esther, because its whole function is to reveal what's hidden. Indeed, as Chazal say, the word Esther is related to the Hebrew word haster, astir, which means to hide. God says, I will hide my face. She is an expression of finding God in that hiddenness. If we have time, I'll tell you about her and the profound lesson it teaches. Now, do you understand why we dress up in masks? Of course, that's the whole point. That isn't a gorilla walking down the street. Don't call the zoo people. Who just picked up the two lemurs who escaped from the Jerusalem Zoo. No, it isn't a gorilla. That isn't D'Artagnan from the Musketeers. No, it's your next door neighbor. It's your friend. Look beneath the mask. Kreplach. You look at Kreplach from the outside, it looks like a piece of dough. But there's meat inside. And if you're a vegetarian, it's soy. I don't mind. And there's meat inside, so don't be taken in by the surface appearances. Underneath is something entirely different. The mitzvah of drinking we'll come to. But let's try to do a little understanding of the Arizal. One doesn't really understand the Arizal, but on the surface. What do Yom Kippur and Purim have in common? A human being is composed of a soul and a body. There's a natural tension between the two of them. The goal of life is that the body should express the soul. That requires attention and control, exercised by the spiritual side, on the physical side, so that the body should be a vehicle for the expression of the soul. And there's that tension and that conflict and that struggle 363 days a year. But there are 2 days in which that conflict and struggle is very much reduced, if not eliminated. One of them is Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, the body very largely ceases to function in opposition, ceases to take up the normal place in one's consciousness. You don't eat and drink. For 25 hours, an absolute fast. Now, if you haven't been there, I tell you that the average religious Jew on Yom Kippur does not get hungry or thirsty. That may sound incredible to you, something that's very hard for you to understand or accept. I'm telling you a fact. Any more than someone who's playing in the fourth period of a football game gets hungry or thirsty. Or someone who's reading a very absorbing book. Watching a very absorbing film. People don't read books anymore. And it's very exciting, and it's involving, and you're identifying with the characters. You don't think about food and drink because you're identified to the theme that you're observing. For a Jew on Yom Kippur, where he's running over his whole life and trying to organize himself to pick himself up and experiencing both the challenge, the worry, and the grace involved in God's forgiveness, the day is a whirl of the deepest emotional and intellectual themes to the point where the body just doesn't figure. It just doesn't figure. No one in the middle of Ne'ilah, the last service of the day, is thinking 45 minutes to the Coke. That's not what's going on. The body is put in the background. It's just put in the background. So that the normal struggle between soul and body is not present. It's a one-dimensional day. It's a soul day. Yom Kippur is the day of the soul. Purim is the opposite. Getting drunk means blocking out the soul's control of the body. It gives the body an opportunity to express itself without the normal control and focus that the soul imposes upon it. Now, the point of getting drunk on Purim is this. Those whose minds are working on two channels, think ahead to why Yom Kippur is only an approximation to Purim. Let's imagine you're watching a tzaddik. a tzaddik, let's say, this is the definition of tzaddik, maybe I shouldn't use the word tzaddik. A person, all of his actions are right. He does everything right. How does he do that? There are two possibilities. One is, he's struggling like everybody else. He's struggling like everybody else. The body wants what it wants, and the soul is focused on the higher things, but in his case, he's very, very successful at controlling and guiding and focusing the body to express what the soul is. He's just very consistently successful. It's one possibility. A more radical possibility is that through years of dedicated effort and focusing of the body changes its character. The body too comes to identify with the spiritual. The body becomes soul-like, and the body too wants the spiritual. Those are two possibilities. Watching from the outside, you can't tell. Okay, every one of his actions is right. Is it because of effortful control, or is it because the body too has been trained and transformed to want what the soul wants? How could you tell the difference? Blank out the control of the soul. Blank out the focusing of the soul. Let the body express itself, and then see what happens. And if the body has been elevated, if the body also has been spiritualized, when you blank out the soul, the body will express itself in spiritual ways. This is what drinking on Purim is supposed to express. For a person whose spiritual life has saturated even the body with spirituality, it's an opportunity to show that. It's an opportunity to demonstrate it for others who could see how far spiritualizing the world can go, how deep an effect it can have. Now, given what I just told you, can anybody explain to me why the shared idea of one-dimensionality, Yom Kippur is a one-dimensional day, it's the soul day. Purim is a one-dimensional day, it's the body day. But still, in terms of one-dimensionality, Purim is deeper, more fundamental, more significant than Yom Kippur. In what way is the one-dimensionality of Purim deeper, more fundamental, more significant, more profound than that of Yom Kippur? It's not an easy question. I'll tell you what the answer is.
For the body to have elevated itself to the point where when you remove the control mechanisms of the soul and the body still seeks the spiritual elevation and not its carnal instinctual desires and cravings, that's a high, I think, well, not that it's a higher level, but it shows more than when you're striving and you're doing what you need to do for the soul to shine through and like, for example, when some people get drunk, they get angry. Some people get nervous. Some people get tense. Some people start to talk more Torah and get more. I've been with rabbis who they drink and they become even more like it just pours out.
But what you're saying is true, but I don't think it's an answer to my question. By the way, it isn't the body that elevates itself; it's the soul that elevates the body. But then
you remove the control of the soul.
Yeah, but that's the prior work. The prior effort was not the body elevating itself. The prior effort was the soul focusing on the body. What you're saying is true, but it doesn't answer my question. My question is, how is the one-dimensionality superior? You said how it's superior, but not how the one-dimensionality is superior.
Is there something to do with chuba?
No.
I'd say Purim is a bigger test of character and more revealing about where you're holding, from what you're saying.
100% correct. But what's got to do with being one-dimensional?
Does it have to do with why Purim is the only chag that stands after Mashiach?
Tell me.
The body is more revealing about what you've been able to do between that battle and the soul. In what
precise sense is Yom Kippur still 2 and Purim 1? That the one-dimensionality of Yom Kippur is compromised. It's only half.
Because you're not allowing the body what it wants.
And therefore
you're only focusing on the soul.
Okay, you've got all the right ideas, but I want my vocabulary. So I'll just let me put the idea to my vocabulary. On Yom Kippur, the body and soul are still 2. They're still 2. They're still essentially opposed to one another. That's why you have to put the body on back burner. You have to get rid of it. Get rid of it because it will disturb. It'll break the focus. It'll break the concentration. So don't eat, don't drink, don't bathe, don't wear shoes, don't have relations. Don't give it its expression. It's an enemy. We have a way of getting rid of the enemy. We build a wall. We don't allow it to function. It's one-dimensional by exclusion. But metaphysically, philosophically, there's still two. Just one's in a cage. So he's not bothering you. Purim reveals that they aren't really two. Or they aren't really, in essence, opposed. The body also is spiritual. The body also comes from the same source. It can be trained to express spiritual character. So ultimately, it isn't the two opposed elements that we thought. If you think about it deeply enough, monotheism wouldn't allow that. It all comes from one God. It couldn't really be ultimately opposed. That would require dualism. But you don't see that. On Purim, you see that it really is all one. On Yom Kippur, one half is functioning, one half isn't functioning. But when you look at the two of them, they still look very different. That's why one half has to be put in a cage. On Purim, you see that in essence, they're really one. That's the deep, deep revelation that takes place on Purim. And now I tell you, and for this I'm roasted every year, now I tell you, if that's what drinking will do for you, show the spirituality that your body has achieved, then you should drink. If not, not.
Say again?
If your drinking will show the spirituality of your body, that your body wants the spiritual, so that when you drink, your soul is not controlling it anymore, the body will express the spiritual, as he said. When you see great rabbis who get drunk, and the Torah that pours out of them, and the love for the students pours out of them, and the love for God pours out of them, then you should drink. If not, you should not drink. You should drink a little bit more than normal, and you should take a nap. So says the Rambam, so says the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch, and many sources that indicate that that's perfectly acceptable. My Rabbi says it's absolutely forbidden to get drunk. Absolutely forbidden to get drunk. So don't let anybody tell you that you have to do it. The Gemara says this, the Gemara says that. The Rambam knew the Gemara, the Ramah knew the Gemara, and
some people drink and they just want to fight, or they just want to.
Correct. At any rate, I'm just saying that's the purpose of it. And now I think you see that all these elements that we started with, I think I answered all the questions. All of them answer to the exact same theme, whether it's the text of the Megillah, or the customs of the holiday, or the Arizal's mystical comment, or they all are expressions of the same theme. The idea of revealing what's hidden, that the miracle's purpose is to teach you how to look at the things that aren't openly miraculous. You with me? Okay, now I want to footnote about this. Now one more general comment. The Megillah ends. God's in his heaven and all's right with the world. The Jews are saved, and Queen Esther is the queen, and Mordecai is the prime minister, and everything's wonderful. Except that Esther remains married to that Jlub till the end of her life. She bears him a son. That son does not function as a Jew. What kind of life is that? I must tell you, I see all the little girls who are dressed up as Queen Esther, I think, what are their parents and teachers wishing on them? No one would say to a Beis Yaakov graduate, my blessing for you is you should have Esther's life. What? What kind of tragedy would that be? What kind of curse would that be? What's going on? People just leave off at the end of chapter 10, and they don't think of the days, the years and years coming afterwards, where she lives like that. I asked this question of many people. The only one that I got an answer from is our son-in-law, who's a Slonim Chassid, very, very deep thinker. And he said, what's her name? Esther. Chazal say the word Esther comes from Astir's Panai. God says, I will hide my face. Her position in the world was to live with hiddenness. That was her position. That was her challenge. And her challenge didn't stop at the end of the Megillah. That was her lifelong challenge, to live in a condition where God is hidden. That at least identifies what her position was. That at least gives a stamp for it in terms that we can understand. But I think we have to be awed by that challenge and by what she sacrificed, what she gave up. Her son is the one who gave permission to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. So, But still, to live there, to be there, to live that life, to bear a son who isn't going to put on tefillin, isn't going to keep kosher, it's too horrible for words. That's also a part of the Megillah. Now, I want to add to this a remark by Rav Dessler, which I think is very important. Very important for the Megillah, very important for us. In this remark of Rav Dessler, he's basing himself on certain classical sources. Not all the classical sources agree. Those of you with me when we talk to Megillah, I use different classical sources, just telling you what he writes in his essay. Achashverosh made a party. 6 months. 127 provinces. Every province, every ethnic group, every national group had its representatives at the party. This was celebrating his kingdom. Everybody wanted to show their loyalty and support. Question in the Jewish community was, shall we participate or not? A delegation of Jews came to Mordecai. Mordecai, it's one of those things, everybody's going to be there, And if we'll be the only one missing, it'll look very bad. Tell us, is there anything forbidden about this celebration? Is there something in Jewish law that forbids it? We're just as firm as you are, Mordecai. If you tell us that it's forbidden, we won't go. Mordecai says, there's nothing forbidden in celebration. I tell you not to go. It's my judgment that you shouldn't go. So they say. So, according to these commentators, it was kosher. In fact, it says explicitly that the drink was according to the will of every person. They made
kosher food for Jews?
No, why not? You weren't there when I taught the Megillah. You have to go back. They're on Torah anytime. You can see this series. So, they say, Mordecai, there's nothing forbidden in Jewish law. And we'll be the only ones missing. Mordecai, go back to your books. You're an ivory tower scholar. You don't know what's going on the ground. We have to be there. They go to the party. They attend the party. What's the result? Nothing. Status quo for years. Now, asks Rav Esther, if we had been there, what would we have said? We would have said, Mordecai's just out of touch. It doesn't understand that you can't turn your back on a celebration of the empire and be the only ones missing. Look, we went, we were represented, we were appreciated, and nothing happened. That's right. It was perfectly okay. Then the king makes someone as prime minister and makes a law, everyone has to bow down. Now, according to the sources Rav Dessler is using in this essay, there was no idol worship involved in bowing down to Haman. It was a political matter. Everybody bows down, except, guess who? Mordecai. So the same delegation comes to Mordecai and says, listen, what are you doing, This guy's unstable, and he's vicious, and no one knows what he can do. Tell us, does it say anywhere in the code of Jewish law that you can't bow down to him? If it's forbidden, we'll follow you. We're just as firm as you are. Where does it say we can't bow down? Says Mordecai, there's no explicit law that you can't bow down. I'm telling you, you shouldn't bow. It's my judgment that you shouldn't bow. What's the result? The result of Mordecai's intransigence, his stubbornness, is that there's a decree of annihilation against the entire Jewish people. Ask Rav Esther, if we had been there, what would we have said? We would have said that Mordecai's dangerous. He's out of touch. He's threatening the life of the Jewish people. Now, says Rav Esther, with 20/20 hindsight, we know that Mordecai was right. But it didn't look that way. It didn't look that way. And this is a lesson that Torah leadership will take decisions that don't look right. That's a function of our short-sightedness. It's a function of our lack of understanding. And this is a subtext in the Megillah to teach us how to look at the leadership that we have and how not to stand in evaluation and judgment of it on the basis of our own impoverished understanding. That's as far as Rav Dessler's essay goes. I want to push it one step further. I believe, I pray that I'm not making a mistake. I believe that Rav Dessler would approve of this. How was it turned around? Esther says to Mordecai, I want you and all the Jews in Shushan to fast for me 3 days and nights, night and day, and I'll go into the king on the third day. Well, This discussion took place on the 13th of Nisan. So the 3 nights and days that they're going to fast are the 14th, 15th, and 16th of Nisan. 15th of Nisan is first day of Passover. To have a 72-hour fast means no matzah that year. And indeed, Mordecai complains. Says to Esther, how can we win God's favor if we violate one of His commandments? And Esther says, if we don't survive, who will eat matzah next year? There won't be any Jews. At any rate, Mordecai agrees with her. See my shiurim on chapter 4 of the Megillah. I want to get the details of that interaction, a beautiful interaction. Now, I want to repeat Rav Dessler's question. If we had been there, what would we have said? We would have said, Mordecai and Esther, you're inexplicable. You're telling us not to eat matzah? How can we gain God's favor by not eating matzah? And listen, the decree is for 11 months from now. 11 months is a long time. Lots of things can happen in 11 months. The king can be assassinated. We can bribe him. We can get allies. There are all sorts of things that can happen. You want to make a fast? Make it next week. You don't have to make it this week. Right now. They had every good reason not to listen. But they listened. They listened even though they didn't understand it. They listened against their own reasons. And that's what turned it around. What turned it around was the willingness to accept the leadership from those who really are the leaders of the Jewish people, even when it goes against your own logic. There's a profound lesson here in Das Torah. We live in a terrible handicap. The handicap of living in a democratic society which teaches that everyone is a judge on everything. Everybody's opinion is just as good as everybody else's, which is, of course, nonsense. You don't do your medicine that way. You don't get your car fixed when it's broken that way. You don't have your electricity in your house done that way. Call a guy from down the block, take the guy with the cheapest price. No, then you want experts. But when it comes to politics and morals and the rest, everybody's equal and nobody's view is better than anybody else's. And that seeps into our population as well. And people stand to judgment on the Torah leadership and pass judgment. This wasn't right, that wasn't right. Why don't they say more about this? Why do they talk about that? When, number one, they haven't a clue what's going on. Most of the people talking have never seen vast portions of the Talmud or the Midrash, let alone analyze it with a scope of genius, let alone have laid their lives on the line, minute by minute, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, for nothing but serving God. And yet they pay no attention to their limitations and pass judgment. The Megillah is teaching us that a key to Jewish salvation is to accept the judgment from above and understand that it will at times look peculiar to you. That's a statement about you, not about them or it. Questions?
Could you speak for a moment about the idea of chuba and Purim?
Chuba, okay. The truth is that it says Mordecai knew what happened. Okay, it's a long story. He knew that the decree was a decree of annihilation. It wasn't obvious. And he told people, and there was an immediate response of fasting and praying and lying in sackcloth and ashes. It says, Mordecai says to Esther, if you don't go into the king, the Jews will say to someplace else. But you'll be lost, because this is why you... The im there, I don't think means with. It doesn't mean if, it means this is why. Sometimes im doesn't mean if. This is why you were put there. How does Mordecai know that they're going to be saved? Because he saw the reaction right away. He saw the reaction of the Jewish people in Shushan. When he put on sackcloth and ashes, and so everyone joined him immediately. Right. Everyone understood that it was life or death, and everyone understood this is the way to get out of it.
How do you find out?
Okay, interesting question. But in the meantime, you asked about Juba. You didn't ask about that, right? So you're jumping from question to question. The response of Juba was the response that was necessary, and he saw in Shushan that it was immediate and spontaneous. He could judge from that what the reaction would be in other places, and the Megillah testifies, wherever the message reached, there was immediate Juba, and that was the key to overturning the decree. So I add one more thing, then I'll take your question. The Chavetz Chaim said something quite challenging. You look at Purim and at Hanukkah, you see both were terrible decrees, terrible dangers, and our responses were very different. In the case of Purim, it was chuba. In the case of Hanukkah, it was armed struggle. Said the Chafetz Chaim, we should learn from that. When it's a threat to the body, a threat of annihilation, the response is chuba. When it's a threat to the religion, which is what the Greek Hellenistic threat was, they didn't want to kill Jews. They just wanted us to give up the Torah, just. Then the response was armed struggle. And he said that when the Bolsheviks took over Russia, we missed the opportunity. We should have gone into the hills and fought against them. Just like the Maccabees fought against the Greeks. So these become templates of how to deal with such circumstances. What does that mean about the Holocaust? It was obvious. The right response was not to run into the woods with the Partisans and shoot bullets. The response should have been the Purim response, the response of doing chuba. We failed in the 20th century twice. We failed to repel communism the way that we should have, and we failed to repel the Holocaust in the way that we should have. Okay, there are questions.
That chuba only happened when the axe was about to come down on us.
That's quite true. It was, the Baal Shem Tov said...
It had to come to that point.
Baal Shem Tov says that in certain circumstances you have to do chuba for your chuba. Because your chuba was a low-level chuba. It only came at the point of the axe, and you should go back and reflect and say, why did I have to wait for that? Why didn't I do it when I was in a higher position? I should have thought for myself that what I was doing was wrong. You're 100% right.
Can we extrapolate from that to understand what's going on today?
Well, we do in a way. The Gemara has a machlokes for Yeshua. One says that the Messiah will only come when the Jews will do tshuva, and the other says we have promises that the Messiah will come. Period. And the other says, but I have proof texts that will only come with tshuva. So the explanation is, the first says, you're right, but it's still absolute because we'll do tshuva one way or another. And if it comes to it, God will repeat the Purim experience, and we'll do tshuva that way. So tshuva is necessary, but it can be manipulated, so to speak. I hope, God forbid we should have to come to it that way again, but that's precisely the point. It can happen again.
How many Jews are there in the world today?
I think they say 13 million, but those are 13 million identified Jews. We don't know how many people have Jewish lineage and who don't.
How many are from?
About 2 million. But that doesn't determine it. Rabbi Aaron Kotler, was asked in America in the 50s, what are we closer to? The Gemara says the Messiah will come either in a generation that's all good or all bad. So he was asked, he asked the boys, he asked the Talmudim, what are we closer to? A generation that's all good or all bad? So of course he said, how much closer to a generation that's all bad? He said, you're making a mistake. All those people out there who don't keep mitzvahs don't count. They're not bad. They're not evil. Wow. They're just ignorant. They don't have a clue what they should be doing. They don't have a clue as to what the truth is. They're neutral. They're like cows. They don't count at all. If we, who know the score, if we would live up to our responsibilities, we'd be a generation that's all good.
Wow.
Don't make a mistake of condemning a person who just is acting the way he is because of ignorance. Yeah.
On the topic of doing tshuva, is that something we should be having in our mind tomorrow? That we should be repenting for the sins?
Okay, I'll tell you, then I'm going to quit. Tomorrow, I believe, is unique, well, according to Womshot. Why are we fasting tomorrow? The 13th of Adar. You'll tell me Esther fasted. Yeah, she did. In Nisan. The 14th, 15th, and 16th of Nisan. So you could say, and some do say this, we're commemorating her fast, but you can't make a fast day in Nisan, you're not allowed to. And since it's something that's relevant to Purim, so they put as close to Purim as possible. 13th before in the rest of the world, the 14th is the day of Purim. That's one explanation, but the Ramban has a different explanation. Ramban says that when Jewish soldiers went into battle, they went into battle fasting.
Always?
That was the rule. And they went because it was an expression of tshuva. Because they understood that it isn't the arrows, you have to shoot the arrows, but it isn't the arrows that are going to win the war. It's your spiritual state. And if the soldiers were fasting, the people were fasting in support. So we're commemorating the fasting that took place in the day of the battle. Which means that this fast is unique over the whole year. It's the only fast that commemorates a success. All the other fasts commemorate failures. Sieging of the city and breaking down the walls of the city and Jerusalem and the assassination of Gotlieb and Achikam. They're all disasters. This is the only fast that celebrates success. Yes, one should think of doing tshuva, but not out of a sense of guilt, but out of a sense of opportunity and challenge. And if you look at the slichos, now you should have slichos with English translation tomorrow morning, you'll see that the slichos do not have the normal breastbeating, I'm guilty, I'm a failure, I'm a disaster, terrible things have happened. It's not like that. It's not like that. The tone is a very different kind of tone. The only fast day of the year that has a positive aspect. Okay.